Use the sample data and confidence level given below to complete parts A through D. A Research Institute poll asked respondents if they felt vulnerable to identity theft. In the poll, N is equal to 941 and X equal to 572 who said yes. Use a 90% confidence level. The A part asks us to find the best point estimate of the population proportion. The point estimate would be found by dividing X by N, or in other words, the number of successes by the number of trials. So in other words, we will divide 572 by 941. And this will give us 0.608 if we round to 3 decimal places. Identify the value of the margin of error E. The margin of error would be equal to half the width of the confidence interval. So let's find the width of the confidence interval using StatCrunch. So we'll click Question Help and we'll go to StatCrunch. We'll click Stat, Proportion Stats, One Sample with Summary. The number of successes will be 572. The number of observations will be 941. We'll click the confidence interval radio button and then make sure that this says 0.90 for a 90% confidence interval as we were instructed to in the problem. Now let's click Compute, and we're going to find our lower and upper limits. Now if we were to subtract the lower limit from the upper limit, we would find the width of the interval, which would be 0.052358. Now the margin of error will be half of that, so we'll divide that by 2, and we'll find 0.026179. Now we're to round to 4 decimal places, so we will call this 0.0262. The confidence interval, then, we've already constructed. And so what we'll do is put the lower limit that we found in the first box and the upper limit in the second box. And we're to round to 3 decimal places. So we'll call this 0.582 for the lower limit, and then 0.634 for the upper limit. We are now to write a statement that correctly interprets the confidence interval. Let's first interpret this in our own words and then look at which of these selections is appropriate. This confidence interval tells us that we can be 90% confident that the actual population proportion of people who feel vulnerable to identity theft is between 0.582 and 0.634. So in other words, the population proportion, we can be 90% confident, lies within that interval, 0.582 to 0.634. Now the reason for that is because if we were to construct this interval over and over and over using samples from this population, 90% of the time, the actual population proportion would lie between those two values. So the appropriate selection will be B. One has 90% confidence that the interval from the lower bound to the upper bound actually does contain the true value of the population proportion.